Welcome to SoulShift, where modern science, ancient wisdom, and real life align to help you create a more joyful, balanced, and fulfilling life. I'm Mindy Gorman-Plutzer, and I am here with my amazing co-host, Christine Morgenstern. Shin. You know, one of the most profound shifts we can make in our lives does not require a meditation cushion or a yoga mat. And it's something most of us do every day, often on autopilot, rushed, or outsourced entirely. We're talking about cooking, about the sacred transformational act of nourishing ourselves and the people we love with real food made with our own hands. And today's guest understands this deeply. Mary Collette Rogers is what she calls a meal making transformationalist. It's a nonprofit called The New Kitchen, which helps people transform their relationship with food, turning healthy meal making from something that feels impossible and overwhelming into something entirely manageable, even enjoyable, even rewarding. Mary's work is inspired by over 35 years in the healthy eating field as a culinary software developer and healthy cooking instructor. She's taught everywhere, from Whole Foods and Wild Oats to corporate wellness programs, law firms, medical practices, and nonprofit organizations that serve communities across the country. What we here on SoulShift love most about Mary's approach is that she understands the spiritual underpinnings of meal making, and that meal making is transformative for so many. She sees cooking not as a chore, but as a pathway to reclaiming our power, our health, and our connection to something really special, something ancient and essential within us.
Welcome to SoulShift, where modern science, ancient wisdom, and real life come alive.
SoulShift is your weekly dose of inspiration and a reminder that meaningful change can be both gentle and powerful.
Together, we'll unlock practical tools, share conversations that spark something beautiful, and celebrate every facet of your incredible human experience.
Your energy matters, your growth matters, and you matter. Let's shift boldly,
joyfully,
together.
Mary, welcome to SoulShift. We are so grateful to have you here.
You bet. And what a wonderful introduction. I think I'm going to write that down and I can use that for my marketing materials. Oh, that's great, Mindy. Thank you. And I'm glad to be here.
You're very deserving of all the accolades, Mary. I've known you for a long time, and I'm really so thrilled that you're here with us on SoulShift so the world can get to know you like I do. So let's start right here. You call yourself a meal-making transformationalist. I said it, I got it right, which I absolutely love. So what does meal-making transformation really mean?
You know, Randy, one of the things that just jumps to mind is that what's so interesting about that term, meal-making transformation, I didn't do any kind of marketing research or anything before I started using it. I have people sign up for my newsletter, and in the old days, we did it with pieces of paper. And one of the questions I had is, are you interested in meal-making transformation? And nearly 85% of people would say yes. And there was no explanation of what that is, but they'd say, yes, I want to learn about this. And so that's what gave me the impetus to say, well, maybe I need to pursue this. And what is it? And I guess what I can say about meal-making transformation is that it is intended to address the problem that we have, which I call an implementation gap. And what that means is that, all the people you meet, all the people I meet, they have very wonderful intentions to eat well. But the problem is when reality hits, it's 5 o'clock, it's 6 o'clock, you've got to get a meal on the table, and we have trouble making that show up, the kind of meal that we would like to be eating. And so that's this implementation gap. And so over my 35 years, I've always questioned, well, how can I help bridge that gap? Because I would have people go to our cooking classes and they would be thrilled at the end. It's like, this is so much fun. I want to do this more. And I'd run into them, 5, 6 weeks, so a couple months later. And life got in the way. And so what I've been trying to do is hone my message down to where I address three things. I call them three solutions for meal making transformation. The first of those is being new in our cooking. And what that means is simply cooking can be radically simplified. I think we have so much influence now with the internet and blog posts and TV commercials and even restaurant menus with these beautiful pictures of these perfect meals. I think we get the impression that we have to perform like that in the kitchen. And I like to grant people full permission. That's not what you have to do. You can do simple things like I do. 75-80% of the time, my meals are soups, skillets, stir fries. They're fast. They're easy to do. So that's step one, is learning how we can simplify cooking. And there's like 6 basic techniques. That takes you through everything. You don't need anything more fancy than that. The second thing is to just organize our kitchen. What I found, I was a kitchen organizer for many years as well. People's kitchens were getting in the way. They were an enemy rather than an ally. And I have a book called Take Control of Your Kitchen, and it outlines and walks people through the 6 kitchen smart strategies. That's almost like Meal Making Transformationalist. The 6 kitchen smart strategies that can help us organize our kitchens and our cooking time. Our kitchens support us. They're our ally. So with those 2 things, we can totally make meal making a manageable thing for ordinary, hectically busy people. But the problem is they take a little investment of time. They pay off, but they do take an initial investment of time. And the problem with that is, who's got time? We don't have time to cook a meal, much less maybe get our kitchen organized or learn a couple basic cooking techniques. And so that's where the third part of the meal making solution comes in. And that's our thinking. And that's kind of an unusual thing. I mean, did anybody ever think that, what does thinking have to do with getting healthy meals on the table? And yet what I found is that my time working with so many people is that our thinking doesn't support us either. Our heads aren't behind our actions. And so that's the most exciting part of meal making transformation in my mind, is how can we change our perceptions and beliefs around the kitchen and cooking so that we are motivated, excited. I'm not saying you have to love cooking by any means, but can we be okay with it? Can we make friends? Can we embrace it? So that's kind of a nutshell of the meal making transformation.
Yeah, that thinking shift.
That's kind of the heart of it. You guys talk about, I think, functional nutrition. Well, this is kind of functional meal making. Is the heart of it is, what is our perspectives and attitudes going into the kitchen? And right now, they're not that great.
It's that mindset shift that is so important. That really filters into so much. And Mary, that I am so drawn to the work that you do because of my work with women around food freedom and body acceptance. And I have seen how deeply our relationship with cooking and nourishment has been shaped by diet culture, right? So that's really where this mindset reframe, almost reclaiming this mindset of abundance that we can bring into the kitchen with us, is really so vital. It's so key. So key. And then the other piece is that aside from diet culture, people are just so tied to their stories, women particularly. I'm not a good cook. I don't have time, as you mentioned before. The narrative of healthy food is too expensive or complicated, right? These are the stories that keep us stuck and keep us to an identity that is certainly not serving us well.
I like all your words because those are the same words I'm using. Culture, reclaiming, stories. Absolutely. Culture that I get concerned about is what I call our convenience eating culture. And I'd be interesting to see the interplay between those two, because our convenience eating culture would like us very much to eat all the food that's rolling off factory lines because that's how they make money, right? And what's interesting that I think a lot of people don't realize is that at the same time convenience food was being marketed to us, that's the modern way to eat, at the same time there was a concerted marketing effort to convince us that cooking is an antiquated act. It's like darning your socks. Nobody does that anymore. It's very dismissive of the kitchen and almost denigrates the kitchen. And so what we have to realize is that when people come to the kitchen with stories like you're talking about, is that I don't have time or it's too expensive. we have to realize that a lot of those messages were planted in us. We were programmed to believe that. And I always think it's interesting that, we're all about evidence-backed, science-backed information. One day I said, is there any scientific study that says that we really don't have time for cooking, or that it's really so overwhelming that ordinary people can't do it? Absolutely not. It's a fabrication of the convenience eating culture. Well, the convenience eating food, and then it's gotten embedded into our convenience eating culture. So your clients are not only feeling the effects of diet culture, they're also getting a lot of negative messaging from the convenience eating culture to keep them out of the kitchen, where they might be able to overcome the effects of diet culture. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. And when you talk about getting out of the kitchen, let's talk about the women who fought for years to get out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Feminism in the kitchen. I'm right there. And people may not know about me, as I practiced law for 7 years or 6 years. And it's interesting that I was part of the first group of female attorneys. Right when I went to law school, 50% of our class was women. And so we were very careful not to talk about domestic things. And I remember always having these ladies' brunches where we'd get together after we gotten our fancy law jobs. And we'd make sure that we didn't talk about anything like cooking or sewing or any of that stuff. And that's where we kind of had to. We were making our way in a male world. But what I feel is it's kind of sad in a way, because I've followed up with many of my friends and what health problems they have had to suffer because, we wouldn't go in the kitchen. It was a badge of honor for feminists to stay out of the kitchen. And, I guess I counted myself among the lucky, because once my kids came and we had a lot of health problems, that's how I got into this whole field. And it was, a gluten-free, dairy-free diet that saved us. And so, I ranted and raved and complained about being in that kitchen 3 times a day, just as much as anybody. But once I got us all healthy again, I had to stop and go, wait a minute. How can I dismiss cooking in the kitchen when that was our pathway to health? To be able to feel good again, be happy kids again. How could I dismiss that? So that's what set me on the journey, is how can we in our busy lives, given the marketing that we've been subjected to, how can we become people to return to a word you all use, the ancient tradition, the centuries old tradition of preparing our food and sitting down and enjoying it?
It's learning to honor both the freedom of choice and the wisdom of nourishment.
I like that.
And honoring the best part of ourselves. You and I were talking before we came on about the true meaning of food freedom. And food freedom does not mean driving the drive-through and getting, as you said, falling into convenience culture. Food freedom is about making choices that honors the best part of yourself.
Absolutely. And it's kind of interesting to me. One of the thoughts that I just had just while I was preparing for our conversation today, I was kind of observing the history of my life. When I was a kid, my mother in the kitchen and us gals helping, the emphasis was just on making meals. At this time, there was no processed foods, or barely. So all we had to work with was real whole foods. And so that was the emphasis. We didn't have a lot of talk about, well, you shouldn't eat potatoes, or you should eat kale, or you should eat it. We just ate the real food that came from our farm. And then along came the convenience foods and the ready-to-eat foods. And of course, we were like kids in carnival, with that. It's like, eat it up. And then, of course, our health started going down in the 90s and the 2000s and so forth. And now we're in this place where we've got some really serious health problems. So now we have to have people like nutritionists and nutrition scientists that try to help us figure out how to eat again. In ancient tradition, haven't people always known how to eat? You were taught you could eat this food. This one will poison you. This is what we have in our surroundings. This is what we eat. But we lost that. That's in going to gas stations and eating at a gas station. So it's just sad to me that we lost that heritage And so now it seems like a lot of our focus has to be on relearning how to eat, which gets us focused on, should I eat this or should I eat that? That's not very free. That's like, oh my God, am I following the rules correctly? And I'm wondering if, part of our work here can we transition ourselves back to where the focus is making these wonderful meals from real whole foods that taste good, that can be very simple, don't have to be fancy, but simple and that just nourish us in ways that hopefully it helps get over food fear. I don't know. That's your area. So, but I just thought it was interesting how we've gone from focused on meal making to we're almost micromanaging what we eat. And now I'm hoping we can get back to where have a big focus on meal making again and see if that solves some problems.
Mary, I think that's really insightful because think about, back in the day, whether it's our grandmother or great grandmother, food is love, nourishment is love, sitting down together as a family is nourishing as love. And that was our meal. And a lot is going on inside our body, whether you look through the lens of your nervous system or your brain or intuitiveness, but there's a lot of neuroscience that's actually happening, I think, through the lens. Tell me if you agree. Like, think about when your grandmother made a pie and you came over. The sensory experience of maybe watching her like cut up the apples and chopping up, whatever, and smelling the herbs and stirring the pots. And I remember my mom would give me, the spoon to taste while she was cooking. And, we're doing something really profoundly from a neurological standpoint and a sensory standpoint. And so I don't know if you touch upon this lens with your clients. Can you talk about like when you observe people that are afraid of the kitchen and then finally have that confidence of making those small, easy meals? Do they shift the relationship with food and with cooking through this sensory experience?
I'm glad you're bringing this up. Mindy mentioned that you're going to bring in the neuroscience, and I honestly hadn't thought about it very much. And so as you were talking, you talk about our mothers and grandmothers and so forth. And so I was thinking back, because we definitely sat down to dinner every night. It didn't matter if there was some school event or some meeting, we always sat down to eat. So I was trying to think through and go, well, what was our sensory feeling? And I don't think we thought consciously about it, but I can say that meal times were always this time of the day where we regrouped, we calmed down, we sat around the table, and we ate, and then we got up and we were done eating. I think it was very sensorially calming, and it was grounding, all those kind of good things.
Well, what you described is embodiment and it is leaning into your senses. But yeah, it was just a natural thing. Like when I think of my grandma, I think of love, I think of food, I think of just warmness, nourishment. And when we cook, we are engaging in all these multi-sensory systems all at the same time. Just think our thoughts and our tastes and our smells and even the sight, the salivatory glands. And it just naturally does shift us from, physiology standpoint. If we were a little hyped up running around, it just, like you said, that groundedness happens, the calmness happens. And kind of in a neat way, I mean, this might be a little nerdy, but it's
All right.
to me, it's a form of nervous system regulation, like having that mindful meal with love, even if you're talking over each other, because that's a form of love too, right?
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I did a podcast with a woman. Her thing was all about mindful eating and teaching people about mindful eating. And when we were doing that podcast, all of a sudden I said, well, wow, it seems like the mindful eating starts in the kitchen because you're chopping the vegetables and, you're feeling the vegetables and you're tasting. Of course, you're going to taste a few things here and there. You're smelling the spices. And it's kind of like that makes it a lot easier than when you sit down to eat, that you can go into a mindful state much more easily because you've kind of had this instead of racing in the door. I mean, I'm picturing how different that is, that you picked up chicken at KFC or you picked up some kind of takeout and you race in, you're all in a hurry, you raced home through traffic, you sit down, think how different those two experiences are. And I always like to say, too, I notice for myself that, all of us work on computers, or at least a lot of us do. For me, there comes a point in the day, it's like, I can't stare at that computer and do this. But you get out to the kitchen and you're touching real food, not artificial intelligence, real food that, you can taste and you can touch and you can chop. And, what you're touching on, I think, Christine, is that these are the riches that the kitchen has to offer. And the sad thing is that in our convenience eating culture, there's been lots of marketing about how we don't want to spend time in the kitchen. It's old fashioned, it's trite, it's a little silly. There's never any press on the wonderful riches of the kitchen. Like what you say, this neurological calming and grounding. There's creativity, there's connection with the people at your table, there's building community around your table. Yeah, there's the stress relief. So I'm totally with you. I'd love to talk to you more about that connection. And, that's something to think about.
I mean, I think if we start with the mindfulness and the gratitude, whether you're showing up at the grocery store, the farmer's market, or the co-op, whatever it may be, and you could even think of before it even got there, like the farmers and, if you want to really go back it up, right? But wherever you initiate your food making process, we have to first buy it. People don't just throw it in at least I don't see a lot of people doing that, throwing it in the basket. We touch the food, right? Like it's a mindful process. And so I feel like this is very helpful for a lot of folks, whether they realize what's happening in their nervous system or not, it doesn't matter. It's just guiding them through just having it be an adventure to go to the farmer's market and try new foods. I try to share with my clients, what's the one new food of the rainbow you're picking this week, to incorporate in. I'm very grateful. A lot of people say, oh, you're so lucky. I have a husband that he de-stresses by cooking. Cooking is his hobby. So I'm like, thank you. But he literally, he's a numbers guy, and he all that chopping and breathing and smelling and creating that secret sauce. It's like he's totally shifted. I can physically see it and feel it from when he walks in the door to when we're in I'm the sous chef. He puts me in my place, but but the point is, it is I don't mind sharing. It's a great example of getting out of our heads and into our bodies and into our hearts. I just feel like everything you're sharing with us, it's not just learning recipes or organizing the kitchen. Like it's perfect because we need those logistics. But then you sharing about making it simple and making it family focused and that type of thing.
We're creating a lifestyle. There was a really wonderful quote. I copied it down from a woman that runs tours, immersive tours into Italy so that she can show people about healthy lifestyles. And she wrote just on LinkedIn the other day about when she came back to America. She came back in the end of October. And she said, I've just returned from southern Italy, and with the last of the tourists gone, I witnessed something far richer than any gelato or ancient ruins. I saw a life fully cooked into gear, a vibrant, active rhythm where diet and lifestyle aren't forced choices, but a simple, deep flow with the seasons. And I thought that was so wonderful because I feel like one of the big things we have to get to when we talk about lifestyle is talking about our culture. And with Meal Making Transformation, it's hopefully inspiring people to think about their culture within their individual lives and maybe their family, household lives. Like, what do we believe and how much do we honor and respect? Those are the two key values of New Kitchen Thinking, is value and respect for the act of making meals. If we value something, we will do it. We might run into some barriers that, oh God, I've got this late meeting, or I don't know what I can make tonight, or whatever. We'll get around those. We'll figure out how to organize the kitchen. We'll learn the few basic skills. But we have to value cooking again and realize that it is our pathway to health. The kitchen and cooking are absolutely critical, vital pathways to health. And so if we can do that, can we change our own culture individually? But then what's really exciting, and this is what that quote gets to, is can we begin to join with friends, neighbors, our community, and like the work that you two are doing, creating this kind of conversation around food and eating? Can we begin to shift the culture that we have that right now doesn't do anything to support us And in fact, it actually sabotages us. And Mindy, this gets back to your word reclaiming. Culture belongs to the people who are in the culture, right? It's ours. It's our thinking. Somehow it got hijacked by convenience food makers. Mindy, in your case, like the diet culture and the diet industry. So can we reclaim that and say, no, we're going to create our own culture that supports us, our nourishment, our ability to have grounding, nourishing meals. That's the big movement that I get really excited about. I call it a new eating culture. Instead of the convenience eating culture, can we replace that with a new eating culture that really honors all of the stuff that you guys are talking about with our ancient traditions and our soulfulness? Yes, that's what we need to get back to. Absolutely.
Absolutely. This so reminds me of a personal story that I would just love to share with you. Years ago, when I was just coming out of my disordered, dysfunctional relationship with food, fearing what food would do to me and learning to embrace what it could do for me, I had stumbled upon a recipe for chili, a vegetarian chili. And this recipe sat on my kitchen counter for probably months. And one day I decided, this is it. I'm going to go shopping for the ingredients. And I did. And I came home and I chopped up the onion and the red pepper and I sauteed a little bit. I trusted myself to use some EVOO, put in the beans, and it started to simmer down. And all of a sudden, I was overcome with this fabulous aroma in my kitchen. And I started to taste and I started to season and taste again. I added some chopped butternut squash and I prepared kale and I threw kale in. And I came up with this unbelievable recipe that I had adapted to suit my needs and my likes. And it was so overwhelming to me how much I could enjoy this chili that I renamed the recipe, Who Would Have Thunk It Chili?
I love it.
Who would have thunk that Mindy would be eating chili? And now I passed this recipe down to my daughters and my daughters-in-law, and it's become a family recipe. And
it's your legacy.
It's
I love it.
Example of a mindset shift and a transformative relationship with food.
Absolutely.
It transfers into our relationship to ourselves and our bodies. And what's so wonderful is, we're talking about practical tips, but the way you're describing it, Mary, you're just making it also accessible, right? It's so accessible. You mentioned that we have been robbed in this culture of a key piece of really nutrition knowledge, right? So where do you see the missing link is there?
Well, I think the kitchen and cooking are the missing link. And a lot of it is because I think we've got so much information out there about what to eat. And as you know, it's conflicting and it's like one day it's this, one day it's that. And a long time ago, I wrote my book, Take Control of Your Kitchen, clear back in 2005. One of the sections was, what should we eat? And I came up with this simple prescription for good eating. And it was, eat real whole foods. Stay away from things that are not foods. Have enjoyment and eat in moderation and with a big variety. Well, and at that time, that seemed odd because there was so much information out there about you should do this diet or that diet. The low fat was ending and the high fat and what Atkinson diet was starting and everything. And so here was this simple prescription for good eating. And yet I'm seeing that that's where a lot of the diet advice is going, is just eat real whole foods. Because I think it is the biggest problem is us eating things that are not foods.
And I think another big piece of this is to replace the word should with could. If we could help the people that we are blessed to work with shift that to, instead of what should I be eating, to what could I be eating, to honor the best parts of myself.
And there's so much out there. When our family had to go on a gluten-free and dairy-free diet, and this was back in early 90s, and a lot of people didn't even know what gluten was. I certainly didn't. And so when people found out that you couldn't have bread and pizza and all the things, 75% of our diet was gluten and dairy. Then when I started getting into it further, I was discovering all these wonderful nuts, all these wonderful fruits and vegetables and grains and things like this. And, I went from a black and white world to a technicolor world because it was so amazing. And that gets to your point of what could we eat? It's like, oh my gosh, go to the grocery store. Well, be careful of certain aisles, but within, the outer aisles and a couple of other qualified aisles, there's so much variety and it's so much fun. And then you get the herbs and the spices and oh my goodness, there's just a wonderful world awaiting for us.
I think what you're saying makes so much sense in you bringing people back to whole foods, maybe just stopping, pausing and going like, what does my body need right now? Is it a warm soup or is it a colorful salad or whatever it is, but something that they're actually making versus grabbing off the shelf. That's not a food. We call a lot of things foods that aren't actually foods, right? And so if someone's listening, I think there's a lot of sometimes fear wrapped around, oh, I can't cook. We talked about this at the beginning. So could you help us share some type of recipe or like an approach? What would a simple, nourishing meal look like? And, pretend I'm that mom with 3 kids and I just got home and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do?
The big one that I'm always talking about is skillets. And the reason I do skillets is because, like I said, probably 50% of my meals are skillets. Another 10% are soups and another 10% are stir fries. So you learn those 3 techniques. And by the way, I have a YouTube channel with some cooking instruction on it. And so we can direct people to that. But there's one that I did for the Wyoming state employees that was all about how to do a skillet. I call it the skillet system, which is a really boring name. But the fact is, if you think of it as a spreadsheet almost, and down one side is all the different ingredients you can have. And it basically some aromatics, some kind of vegetable, some kind of seasoning, some kind of protein, and maybe you've got a carb, depending on whether you eat carbs or not. And then across the top, you have Indian variety, you have Mexican variety, you have Mediterranean variety. Just by swapping ingredients, you can come up with dozens and dozens of dishes. Special advantage of that is not only variety, but you can use up whatever's in your refrigerator. You learn to do that. And it's mostly by changing out the seasonings and whatever's in season. So that's the skill that I like to teach people. You only need to know one basic technique, and that's how to saute. And even if you don't know how to saute, if you just know how to fry food, you can do it. Sauteing just gives you a little extra technique there. When I talk about being new in our kitchen, you don't have to have a fancy recipe. You don't have to make a fancy recipe. It can be a one-dish meal, and yet it's completely satisfying and completely nourishing. You can't go wrong. It's got to be healthy because you got your vegetables, your protein, and your carbs. It's got it all in there. And it's all real whole foods. So that's the kind of thing that I would suggest is learning that. And I think a lot of people can figure it out on their own. But if it helps, go to my YouTube channel and check out that skillet thing. Take a look at that. And it's also a cook-along. So you get the recipes and a shopping list and everything. So you can cook along with me.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Well, I love that you keep it really simple. And that makes sense. And I love how you describe that. And I didn't know we could do a cook-along. So that's even better. If we combine this basic but insightful knowledge that you just shared, of how to put it all together, and then maybe look back at, our ancestral knowledge, whether it's our grandmothers or great-grandmothers, what's a piece of kitchen wisdom that you could share with us to make things a little more intuitive maybe and a little more joyful, like sprinkling them, because you just shared with us how to make it easy. So would that be cooking with a partner or maybe with music?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think the foundation is the thinking, coming to value and respect meal making. Why I use the word transformation is that I think it gives us the ability to be patient, because changing the way we think is not something that happens generally overnight, especially when we have had this ingrained marketing for years and years. It's been 7 decades now. So it's going to take us a while of really being conscious. I call it raising our kitchen consciousness, that we need to really be thinking about who's sending messages for me, what's their agenda? And do I really want to believe that? So I think that's the foundation because, like I say, if we value something, if we respect something, we'll make it happen. But you're talking about some interesting tips there. I think one of the problems with why we hate going in the kitchen, particularly women, you might remember that in the old days, the kitchen was kind of separated. There wasn't the great room. The women was off in the kitchen and all the fun was out in the living room. And nowadays that's kind of changed. Everybody's in the kitchen. It's kind of a problem in a way. Can't get anything done. But absolutely invite everybody in. Absolutely. If you have a partner, they need to be in there. Kids need to be in there. And there was one other thought that I had. Actually, I still do this all the time, but I remember the first time is I was talking with my sister on the phone and it's like, God, I got to get dinner going. And so I just put my headset on and cooked dinner and told her all about what I was doing. And so she said, oh, I'm going to try that now too. And so I use cooking as my time to catch up with friends. And so the other day, a friend came up. I had to wash this big bucket of carrots that were dirty. And, honestly, we sat there and talked for an hour and a half and I got a whole lot of carrots washed. So those are the kind of things that can turn it into, yes, it was joyful to sit there and have a long conversation with an old friend. I think those things are absolutely wonderful. Oh, and I had one client who discovered that this was a good use for wine. She would have a glass of wine.
Oh, I love it. I love everything you're saying. And I think it ties into just energetics. And obviously, we're all energy. Everything's energy. Food is energy, And I think you just gave a beautiful example of operating, cooking, and eating and enjoying food at a higher energy frequency, which automatically eventually floats into that love and joy of vibration. So I felt that.
Oh, I like that energy. And you got to wonder, what does that do for our health? When we're putting that food in our body and it's in good energy making it, good energy eating it, that's got to be worth something.
It's more than meets the eye. The kitchen is indeed the critical pathway to the good health that we all crave and that we want to share with the world. Mary, this has been such a nourishing conversation. We talked about reclaiming our power through something as simple and sacred as cooking our own food, that we can shift our mindset from I can't to I'm learning, that the kitchen can be a place of transformation rather than obligation. It's profound work, Mary.
Your input, that was really fun for me, the neurodynamic and what you offered me. It's like, oh, this is fun.
Through my lens, it all connects. The mindset shift, creating these new neural pathways, and then you moving from this beautiful part of the energetics to just making it so easy and practical. And I think that's what a lot of people need and want, which is, I think, what has been keeping them away, from the kitchen. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, but we kind of need all three. We need the practical, we need the stuff up here and here. Yeah, we did that at the same time. Ladies, thank you so much for having me. I just loved it.
Mary, before we close, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about the new kitchen?
Absolutely. I've got a little booklet on meal making transformation, and it shares my journey to figure out why do I need to transform my meal making and kind of the crazy mindsets I had to heal and cure. So that's a great place for people to start. And they can connect with me and get that booklet for free at thenewkitchen.org. I would love to have you join me.
Will absolutely be in our show notes. And again, thank you so much. It's been such a gift, such a fun conversation.
You're right, sure was.
We really hope this conversation has inspired you to see that your kitchen and meal making can be seen through new eyes, not as one more thing on your to-do list, but as a sacred portal to better health, deeper presence, and reclaimed wisdom. So maybe tonight, instead of rushing through dinner or ordering takeout, you take just 15 minutes to make something simple with your own hands. And notice what you smell, notice what you touch, notice how it feels to slow down and truly nourish yourself. Notice what happens in your body. That's a shift. That's transformation. That's your nervous system learning a new way. And as we always say here on SoulShift, small shifts create big transformation. It's sometimes the most powerful shift happens right in your own kitchen.
Oh, I agree, Mindy.
Thank you.
If today's episode resonate with you and recipes, both the episode and the recipes, share your favorite meal making moment with us on social media. That'd be amazing. Tell us one simple thing you're going to cook this week. We'd love hearing from you. And, if you're new here, welcome to SoulShift community. We'd love for you to follow and subscribe and just join us every week in this conversation, because it always goes down a beautiful path with wonderful guests like Mary, and just exploring what it means to be that messy reality of being human. So until next time, keep shifting in your mind and just keep living in your heart. Thank you for sharing the sacred time today.
We hope something in this conversation touched your heart
and offered nourishment for your soul's journey.
Remember, transformation is most effortless when it happens one tender shift at a time.
Until next week, we invite you to carry one insight from today into your life.
Not as a task.
Think of it as a superpower to yourself.
If something resonated, we'd love to hear from you. If you're joining us on YouTube, feel free to leave us a comment below.
Your words ripple outward, offering connection and comfort to others walking this path beside you.
If SoulShift feels like home, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review.
Your support will help us reach more hearts that need to hear they're not alone.
We're holding you in love, so know you're not alone. Your journey matters.
May your heart be filled,
and may your path be filled with grace.